Monday morning. Good morning, everybody. Monday morning, 9 a.m. Israel time. Welcome to our Monday Motivation Spotlight series. I'm Lesley Kaplan, seeing you same time, same place, every Monday morning. Thank you for joining us. Most of you are joining here locally from within Israel, and we do have people from abroad that join and sometimes watch our recordings on YouTube and Spotify. As I said, I'm Lesley Kaplan, and this series is brought to you by ACI, and also with our co-hosts and sponsors for the month, J Homes, Jerusalem Fine Realty. Thank you so much to both of them. We have a double session today for those of you that have been staying on and joining for both. Some people may be joining for the second half. For those of you that are joining live, at least it's a double session. Today, end of 2023, I guess we could say Happy Christmas or Merry Christmas, although we don't celebrate it here in Israel. But many of us come from the old country, or most of us do, so we're familiar what goes on December 25th. Today we have, for 25 minutes of inspiration, my friend, colleague Jacqueline Rose, who I'm going to be introducing in a moment. And then following that, I invite you to stay with me, that we have Tiffany Yael Mars, who's going to be talking about publishing, collaborating, networking, all in the publishing field. So it's going to be super interesting, super inspiring. In the second half, we're also going to be having 2 breakout rooms. So make sure that you stay with us for that. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest. I remind you that you can also write in the chat. You're going to be remaining on mute for this first half. You can write in the chat what you do, although it's not an official networking group. And please share any inspiration or anything that you learn or hear from Jacqueline, anything that you'd like to add via the chat, as well as if you have any questions. So Jacqueline, I'm going to spotlight you in just a moment. Jacqueline is a woman's hormone health practitioner. She's into yoga, she's into functional blood work, she's a menopause educator, and many of you know her. Jacqueline, thank you so much for being our guest today, and we look forward to hearing your words of wisdom and some inspiration and how as women we can help ourselves and we can move forward and be healthy. Thank you so much. Jacqueline, before you start, I just want to say we'll be going through to 9:25 today rather than 9:30. We'll have a 5-minute coffee break for those of you that are remaining with us, where I'll stop the recording and then we'll move forward for our second half. So please make sure you stay with us. It's going to be awesome. Jacqueline, the floor is yours. Take it away. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Yes, it's Monday morning, Christmas morning, but it's a regular morning here in Israel. Welcome, everybody. So yes, I am a menopause educator and coach, a hormonal health specialist, yoga for women's health, functional blood work, functional nutrition, lots of different things. But my real focus is and passion is really supporting women to change the way they understand and experience their menopause journey, and really helping women to get much more proactive in their women's health experience. I know that you've had, Lesley, some amazing speakers over the past few weeks talking about stress and all things like that. I am going to also talk about stress today, but from a slightly different perspective. I like bringing new and fresh approaches to women's health issues, really from the perspective of our hormones and how everything that we do and everything that we experience is really starts from the cornerstone of everything that we experience is our hormones, our hormonal health, our hormonal balance. And in the case of stress and symptoms, and when things are not really going well, hormonal imbalance. And I know that this sort of series was started up also to bring a bit of inspiration and a bit of hope and maybe some sort of good vibes to everyone, given the state of our world at the moment, and specifically in Israel. And I hope that I will also do that in the short time I have. So let's start with, I know that some of you may know this, sort of what is stress, but more than what is stress, what does stress actually do to our bodies? And yes, all of us living in Israel, we know what stress probably feels like. We know what it looks like. We know what it feels like, definitely over the last few months. But in normal life, stress shows up in lots of different ways. And there are 4 types of stress, which I'm not going to go too much into today, but just to give them their topics, the headings of them, there is acute stress. There's the, oh my God, I've got a deadline. Oh, my daughter's getting married. Like that sort of crazy acute stress where when the stress trigger, a deadline, a wedding, you know, Rosh Hashanah cooking, or, you know, Christmas lunch cooking, whatever it may be. When that is over, that stress trigger disappears. There's chronic stress, which is stress that doesn't disappear. And a great example is we're at war. Another example is you have aging parents, or you have a special needs child, or you have financial difficulties. It is a chronic stress that never goes away and is there. And that stress is sometimes the hardest stress to navigate because often it's out of your control. The third type of stress is trauma stress. And if anyone is familiar with the book, The Body Keeps the Score, or is familiar with any type of therapy, dealing with trauma. And when I say trauma, it could be big T trauma or little t trauma. It could be that when you were 8 years old on the playground, girls made fun of you, or it could be, God forbid, some type of abuse or anything like that. So big T trauma, small t trauma, our body interprets it as stress, and it lives with us, and it can come out at all different times of our lives. And then the fourth type of stress is biological stress, exposure, toxins, mold, metals. We usually ignore that type of stress, but for anyone with an autoimmune disease or some type of chronic disease, we have to look at that environmental toxin stress. So now that we understand the different types of stress, you may start to be thinking about, yes, that stress sounds familiar to me. Or yes, I've noticed that when I'm under that type of stress, something happens in my body. So I'm going to share a graphic, which I think I can do, that sort of shows us what happens in our body when we have stress. It is not just, oh, I'm so stressed out. There are real, serious biological things that happen in our body. Wait, just hold on one second. Okay, so real biological things that happen in our body, long-term things and short-term things. And we can sort of, can everyone see this graphic? I hope everyone can see this graphic.
Yeah, we're good, we can see it.
Okay, brain function. Feeling worried, nervous, unable to switch off. That sounds quite familiar with stress. But headaches, tension headaches, migraines, mental health challenges, anxiety. You can see I'm sort of going between the short term and the long term. Short term, I think a lot of us are familiar with those. The worrying, the heart beats faster, you feel like your heart is racing, breath gets a bit quicker, a lot of tummy issues. If you're under stress, often you'll find that you need to run to the toilet more, sort of that, the bowel, the body really trying to flush itself out. Skin may become more sensitive. You may feel your muscles tighten or tension, and that feeling of like butterflies in your tummy, like that emotional, or that like expression that we use, like I have butterflies in my tummy. That is the sort of emotional expression of a very biological response to stress. So there are those short-term stresses, and yet low libido, low energy, feeling tired, or sometimes feeling like super aware and super alert. And this is because the impacts of cortisol. This is the normal, natural, biological impacts of cortisol, which I know our other speakers over the last few weeks have talked about. But if we are under things like chronic stress, trauma stress, environmental stress, and even today our acute stress, which really isn't even so acute, all of us are experiencing chronic stress. Our body is not biologically meant to live under 24/7 chronic stress. We are meant to have our nervous system regulating between high stress points and and relaxation points. But when we are under stress on a continual, constant basis, we have these long-term impacts, which mean that all those short-term things that we can see start to become chronic health problems, chronic symptoms, such as we said, the migraines, the headache, the constant brain fog, the mental health problems, the anxiety, the depression, the low mood, heart issues, cardiovascular issues, because the heart is pumping the whole time. You may have heart palpitations, or often feel breathless, or feel like you can't breathe very often. When we look at those long-term issues of skin, hair, all like the metabolic things, all of those types of things become more chronic. Definitely gastro problems, a lot of gastro problems, whether it be irritable bowel syndrome or food sensitivities, or all different types of things like that. Infertility issues, irregular period issues. Stress is a major trigger for reproductive irregularities. Low libido, low energy, all of those types of things. Okay, there's a question, but I'm not quite sure, is it?
Yeah, Jacqueline, yeah, there's a question, and maybe you want to just take down the slide now so that we can also see you large. How does this apply to men as well? Obviously, a lot of what you're saying applies also to men, except there are certain elements where a woman it does affect separately.
So I will say, yes, this absolutely applies to men. The reason why, yes, it absolutely does. But the reason why I focus on women is obviously because I'm a woman myself, but more importantly is that the world of women's health has been exceptionally underrepresented in healthcare in general. And a lot of our women's health issues and a lot of our women's health symptoms, especially in perimenopause and menopause, are very misunderstood and are treated as really not with deep understanding of how women's health is impacted by our hormones, by a lot of different things going on. So stress in men is much more obvious, it's much more understood, and a lot of our women's health issues are really not understood, not well researched, not well funded, not well diagnosed, and have poor treatment options. So yes, this definitely applies to men, but it's much more relevant for women. Okay, so this is all great. Oops, my earphone. One second.
Right, it's all great. And tell us how we can now deal with it and cope with it, especially during these challenging and ongoing times where we're having ongoing stress.
Exactly. So you can say to me, Jacqueline, this is great. This is wonderful. Like, so informative. Thank you so much. I know what happens to my body when we're under stress. Cortisol, I understand, you know, that this is about cortisol. This is about long-term cortisol. This is about the long-term impacts of cortisol. But what do you want me to do about it? Like, we're at war. What can I do about it? Or
even if they're joining from Kurzlauritz, we're exposed, and everyone's exposed to a lot more anti-Semitism now, and stress, and wanting to hide being Jewish in some ways. We've heard of that, unfortunately, in so many instances.
Yeah. And also before the war, there was stress in our lives, you know, work pressures, financial pressures, relationship pressures, family pressures. We live in a very stressful society. We live in a very stressful modern world, with all the different triggers and all the different stimuli that we have. Stress is, unfortunately, a significant piece and part of our lives, which is why there are so many health implications and why there is so, you know, why we're not really functioning. So there is a lot of the stuff that we are familiar with: good breath work, regulating our nervous system, yoga, meditation, all the things that I'm sure people are familiar with and have been discussed here in the past. I want to come at this from a slightly different perspective, because my focus is always looking at hormones and talking always about hormones, because I really passionately believe that when we understand our hormones, we can understand our women's health. Everything comes back to hormones, creating, you know, hormonal health and balance, or in the reverse, we are experiencing symptoms because of hormonal imbalance. So I want to share with you, I want to talk about the 4 feel-good hormones. So some of you may have heard about these hormones in the past. And some of these hormones actually may have quite negative press in our society. And I'm going to, if I can, share another image, which just sort of shows us what these 4 feel-good hormones are. And I'm going to focus on them and really talk about how do we get to really hone in on supporting ourselves and helping manage our stress via boosting these 4 feel-good hormones. And we'll also talk about how we do that, okay? So I have a couple of graphics and I just want to decide which one is the best one to share that's going to be the easiest. So let me just take a peek. Okay, let's just start with this. You can actually, while we're waiting, put in the chat, what do you know? What do you think the 4 feel-good hormones are? Let me ask you, what are the 4 you've heard about? You think, okay, yeah, you know what? Yeah, that may be one of them. And I will give you that spoiler that one of them definitely has a very, very bad reputation. Justine, you're cheating. You know them already.
Right, Justine definitely knows them already. Doesn't matter, she's helping us.
She's helping us, yeah, although she has missed out one. Breath work, yes, thank you. You've been coming to there's someone else has been doing some breath work. Yes, dopamine. Okay, these are the 4 feel-good hormones: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. Okay, you've already got here the triggers about sort of how we can support those 4 hormones, but let's focus on dopamine a minute. It is the rewarding chemical. Dopamine is the thing that we know about in very, very negative ways. In our modern society, we always talk about that dopamine hit because it has very addictive properties. And it is really talked about in that very addictive way. But in its natural biological context, dopamine is about reward. And it's about doing something that makes you feel good because of the reward piece of it. Okay, so for example, we have over here completing a task. When you complete your task, you feel good. So if you are a productive procrastinator like I am, sweeping the floor makes you feel good, and you can tidy your house and you get a dopamine hit rather than sitting down and actually completing a work task because you're too stressed out, your brain isn't functioning properly, you've got brain fog because you're so stressed out and you're listening to the news or you're worrying about something. So you go do a task that gives you an easy hit, an easy reward, like doing your laundry or making dinner. I know some people don't like making dinner, or sweeping the floor for me is a great one. I feel such satisfaction afterwards. My house is all clean and tidy, but really it's all an illusion because I'm getting that dopamine hit, but it's really not a good, effective dopamine hit. Next one is oxytocin, and many of us are familiar with oxytocin from pregnancy and birth, but oxytocin is the love hormone, okay? And we talk about it a lot, about touch to touch, skin to skin after you've given birth and connecting with your baby, and the oxytocin hormones are flowing, and oxytocin definitely helps with labor and delivery. But oxytocin actually is about socialization, and specifically for women, female socialization. One of the best ways to support our nervous and to help rebalance our hormones is socialization between women. There is evidence that it really releases, it has a biological impact. It has a biological response of releasing oxytocin. So going out with a friend for coffee is a nervous system regulatory activity. It will help de-stress you biologically. You feel it in yourself emotionally, but biologically also. Serotonin, we hear a lot about, especially if you're familiar with any of the mental health challenges and anxiety, depression, and we're all familiar with those SSRIs, which help to put in sort of rebalance the serotonin in our brain. It is a mood stabilizer, but it helps with not just, it's not just about supporting mental health. It does a lot of other things in our body. It really helps to change brain. And if you are stressed out, and as we've talked about, migraines, short-term memory loss, brain fog, headaches, not being able to focus, that serotonin piece is really, really important because it helps us to rebalance and support brain function. And the last one, together with dopamine, the endorphins also very often have a negative response, a negative context in our society. But endorphins is the natural, it says a natural painkiller. I think there's a better word for it, which is, 1 second. I think endorphins help to release and help, oops, I'm going to stop sharing, sorry. Help us, the endorphins really help us to release a lot of the stress. It really helps us. It is pain management. It absolutely is, but it really helps us to alleviate stress, anxiety, depression. It really helps us to support ourselves. Again, sort of tying all of this together, it's often the one that is ignored. We always talk about dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. Endorphins is often the one that is ignored. It is a natural painkiller. It helps to support pain management naturally in the body, but it also really helps to relieve stress and anxiety. So how may you, each of these 4 hormones do very, very specific things in the body. I group them together as the feel-good hormones, but they do very, very specific things in the body. And how we can support ourselves to boost those hormones, we can do it in very specific ways because of, as I've explained, that how each of them are specifically different. So in that graphic there were examples, but I'm just going to go through a few things. So
okay, we just have a couple of minutes left,
yes,
Jacqueline, so you probably won't have time to go through them all, but maybe
I want to give just 2.
1 or 2, and then you can all write in the chat what you're feeling, any bit of inspiration, what you're going to do now of the 4 that Jacqueline mentioned. And I will say, for those of you who are continuing with us through to the second half, when we start, we're going to be doing a breakout room where we're going to be doing exactly that, sharing with each other how we're managing with our stress and giving tips to each other. So do stay on with us for that.
So I think the thing that I recommend the most are 2 of the things. One is the being outside in nature, going for a walk, going to the beach. We're very lucky here in Israel. We have access to the beach, and we have, 9 good months where we can be at the beach. You don't need to be going with your kids. You can just sit, if you hate the sand, you can just sit on the promenade. But being out in nature is a really, really important way to boost these. Also because of sun exposure, and we know vitamin D is a critical supporter of good health. So exposure to vitamin D, being out in nature, being, again, it can be anywhere. It can be in a forest, it can be on the beach, it really could be anywhere. And you can be walking, and if you're walking out in nature, then that's great because you're also moving. So I think that is the first and really easy thing to do. And there are so many different ways that you can do that and you can implement that. But the sort of general concept of being out in nature as much as possible in whatever way that looks like. And the second one is which I think is great, especially for women, is that boosting the oxytocin of socialization. And it can be, and socialization, hopefully with laughter. Laughter is a critical, and I know it's so hard to think about laughing and bringing joy into our lives at this moment in time. And I definitely know that for our people listening to us out of Israel, this time of year with Christmas, New Year, so much family, so many kids around, all the pressures and everything. It is joyful, but it's also exceptionally stressful. But socialization, specifically women groups, women circles, going out for coffee, meeting up with friends, such an easy thing to do that can actually have such a really important biological, chemical change in your body.
Absolutely, absolutely. Jacqueline, thank you so much. It was very, very informative, especially with the 4 types that you showed. We all know that we do these types of activities, but yes, if we can engage in them more, it's definitely a way of us reducing all of our stress. Ladies, thank you so much for being here. Don't run away. Okay, I'm going to, in a moment, going to be ending the recording and then starting it for the next one. Thank you so much. Every Monday, please join us. Make sure you save this in your calendar. It's the Monday Motivation Spotlight Series brought to you by myself, Lesley Kaplan, with our wonderful guests every week and co-hosted by ACI, and this month by J Homes Jerusalem Fine Realty. Jacqueline, thank you again. Each of us can decide 1 or 2 things that we're going to take away from this and what we're going to focus on and make the most effort. So I'm going to end this recording here now for those that are listening to the Monday Motivation, and we look forward to seeing you next time.